Hillary Clinton has been endorsed by prestigious daily newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post. Donald Trump has been endorsed by the somewhat less prestigious Las Vegas Review-Journal and the National Enquirer. What your right angle crew wants to know is who would receive the coveted endorsement of Russian President Vladimir Putin. I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is the right angle on who is Putin for. And no kidding around on this one, gents. Michael Ledeen had an interesting thought piece on Monday trying to get inside the mind of the KGB man who runs Russia and who is believed to be using WikiLeaks to influence our presidential election. So first, I want to get to the pro-Trump argument. It's no secret that for his campaign, Donald Trump has hired and promoted several people with deep ties to Moscow, and he's even promised basically to hold NATO hostage to squeezing money out of our allies. However, as Ledeen noted in his column, Trump is also a big fan of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who is deeply critical of Putin and said in his recent book that Russia is once again our enemy. So how about it, Bill? If you're hoping for an American president that you can do business with, is it the deal maker, Donald Trump?
Before I answer that, let me just say one thing about foreign influence on elections. One thing that is crystal clear to me is that ISIS is rooting for Hillary Clinton real hard because ISIS has been really quiet lately, and every time there's an ISIS attack, Donald Trump's poll numbers rise significantly. And if ISIS wanted Trump to win, we'd be seeing people getting gunned down in every mall in America.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question about that. Putin's a little harder to parse with relation to Trump. Certainly the Russians have, through the 8 years of the Obama administration, after the reset button was hit, which actually, the State Department couldn't translate one Russian word in front of national television. She hit the reset button. It didn't say reset. They got that wrong. So if you're Vladimir Putin, you've got to love a State Department and a foreign diplomacy for the United States where they cannot translate one Russian word correctly. They now basically own the Middle East, and they hadn't for 50 years, 60, 70, 80 years now, something like that. They're on the move, and they've been on the move against Obama, and I think a lot of these dangerous moves are exactly what I and any other sensible person predicts when there's perceived weakness. Now, Hillary doesn't strike me as weak as Obama, but Hillary is a machine. She's just going to do whatever she needs to do to get elected or whatever. Look, if I'm Vladimir Putin, and it's not like up for discussion, folks. If I'm Vladimir Putin and I've already written a check to Hillary Clinton Foundation in exchange for 20% of the United States uranium, then that's somebody I can deal with. How much money would it take for you to give me the launch codes? How much money would it take for you to tell me where our nuclear submarines are? There's a price for everything with Hillary. Trump, on the other hand, strikes me, I think at his best, he can be a fairly shrewd negotiator, and I think to some degree, Putin would like to reestablish this. Being enemies with the United States doesn't do you any good anytime ever if you can be friends and still get what you want. Let me put it that way. So if I'm Vladimir Putin, I think I want Hillary if I'm determined to conquer the world, and I want Trump if my actual objective is to consolidate what I've taken and then reestablish relationships with the United States.
Well, Bill, this is kind of off topic, but you brought up the reset button, and it's not just the fact that Clinton couldn't get the right Russian word on there, but hitting the reset button is an English idiom that probably doesn't even translate well into Russian. Does that indicate some kind of shallowness in her thinking about her respect for other cultures?
It's indicative of the incompetence at the State Department, including the Secretary of State. I cannot imagine John Bolton doing such a thing. I cannot imagine John Bolton doing such a thing for his personal aggrandizement, right? It's a photo op. It's a publicity picture. Look, here I am grinning my insane witch grin, and I'm holding up a button, and here hit reset button, and it's like a toy button. And look, what a wonderful picture of us. John Bolton would meet with the Russian ambassador in a quiet place, and they would get right down to brass tacks about what each perceives the other's natural interest is and what we can give up and what we can't. And, Bolton actually is so interesting and makes such a great Secretary of State because the first thing I heard Bolton say after Obama was elected was he said that Obama has promised to use diplomacy for our national, that we're going to switch from war to diplomacy. And Bolton, who's a diplomat, said, diplomacy is a tool. Diplomacy is not a solution. Diplomacy is not a strategy. You can't say we're gonna depend on diplomacy. It's like saying we're going to depend on coal with our dealings with the Russians. What is the national interest of the United States, and how can the diplomats accomplish that mission? That's never been clear with Obama. Well, it has been, but you can't just come out and say we're for Iran, we're for the Muslim Brotherhood, we're for
Well, you can say it with your actions.
Well,
exactly.
And Steve, it's even worse. I mean, if you go back and watch that video of that reset button thing, which, if I recall correctly, the actual word translated as overcharged. But
perfect, right?
Yeah. So if you go back and look at the video, the Russian official, who I think was Sergei Lavrov, but I'm not sure.
Oh, he looked deeply confused.
Yeah. He said he spoke English, and with his Russian accent, he said, "You got it wrong." Because she said, did we get it right? And he said, "You got it wrong." And then listen to the tape. She repeats what he says, "You got it wrong," and she apes his accent. She actually imitates his Russian accent. like it's like a novelty to her as the Secretary of State that some guy talks all funny like a Rusky.
I no ways tired. And not,
that's right.
Not only that, Bill left out the best part about Secretary of State John Bolton, and that is he would scare opposing diplomats into submission with his mustache. Secret power. All right. Speaking of business deals, which we were a couple of minutes ago, I promise you, last year the New York Times, which endorsed Clinton despite this, broke the story that the Clintons were deeply involved in brokering a deal which put Russia in charge of 1/5 of America's uranium output. The stuff that makes nukes, which the Russians can make money off of now, selling our uranium to Iran, which got out from under sanctions thanks to a non-treaty which Clinton says she will uphold. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton seems perfectly willing to go to war with Russia over Syria. And in fact, the Russian propaganda machine has been in overdrive with warnings about, you guessed it, Clinton starting World War III over Syria. So how about it, Scott? If you are pro-Clinton, are you also pro-Putin?
I think that that Vladimir Putin is smart enough to be able to deal with either eventuality. I think he's a good student of human nature, and I think he figures out how to play people to his advantage. And that's not necessarily a criticism of him. The guy, you know, he was KGB. His job is understanding human nature and being able to read people and being able to take appropriate action based on what feedback he's getting. So I think he'd be okay either way. My tendency is to believe, though, that he would favor a Clinton presidency, not because he's got her in his pocket because of a uranium deal or anything else like that, but because she is ultimately predictable. He knows how people like Hillary Clinton operate, these craven politicians who want nothing more than to retain their own power, to look good in the eyes of the right people. And so he is totally familiar with how to manipulate her. And so therefore, I think he'd feel more comfortable with her. Donald Trump, while I think he gets Trump on the level of a tough negotiator and somebody who understands, business is business, I think he also knows that Trump is willing to, do that. What was that called in Hunt for Red October? It was like a Crazy Ivan.
Crazy Ivan. Yeah. U-turn.
So I think that he knows that Trump can execute a Crazy Ivan, and next thing you know, you're in the face of a torpedo. So I think he'd rather have somebody that he can play according to established rules.
Yeah,
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Actually, two little things.
Sure.
First of all, Donald Trump has promised to reinvigorate the American military, which has, in fact, been coasting a long time. Russia's been upgrading all of their military assets, including their nuclear weapons and missiles. Trump has said he's going to put America back in the fight and spend more money on defense. Hillary Clinton obviously hates the military, maybe worse than Obama. So if you're Vladimir Putin, you definitely want to be pulling for Clinton on that one, I think. I don't think you want a guy who's saying we're going to rearm America to become president. So that's number one. And number two, this administration now under Kerry is so incompetent that they have recently, like a few days ago, I heard they put 330 Marines into Norway. That's on the border with Russia. You have to understand that there are some things that the term is you touch somebody where they're tender, right? Where they're sore. Putting American troops on the border with Russia, even if it's just 330 Marines, produces a result that is not rational in Russians. They have been invaded from the West forever. It strikes me as the kind of stupid bullying move that actually does lead to conflicts, when in fact what you want is strong, consistent presence all around the world, and not simply just backing up and blowing whichever way the wind is going.
Yeah, and let me tell you, we've had 8 years of Putin playing 3D Vulcan mind space warp chess while, Obama sits across the other side of the table eating paste and everyone praises his genius. Oh, no, he's playing 3D Vulcan mind chess. Well, it looks like paste.
Paste.
And I kind of like the idea of a guy like Trump who will just upend the whole board. But you know what, folks, it's impossible to tell what Putin really thinks. He has a poker face trained decades ago by some of the best spies in the business. But if I were to imagine myself as Vladimir Putin sitting across a negotiating table from a U.S. president, the person I want to be across from is someone I've done business with in the past, someone who's demonstrated a calculated enthusiasm for selling out American interests, and someone with a lousy record for keeping secrets. And that person, of course, is Hillary Clinton. But even more than that, I would want a president so tainted by scandal and by a corrupt election process that I, as Vladimir Putin, helped to corrupt, that they would enter the White House perhaps politically crippled from their very first day in office. And on that score, Vladimir Putin may have won the U.S. election for president months ago. And that is The Right Angle on Who is Putin For, brought to you by the paying members of BillWhittle.com. Thanks to them for their support, and thank you for your time. We'll see you again.